Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining my session about do you know these libraries? So my name is Roberto Cortez, and I'm very happy to be here today with these awesome concepts called JCON. Um, so before getting into my actual session, I would like to tell every one of you that I hope that everyone is safe at home, especially because we are on a uh, uh, pandemic crisis, right? So unfortunately, we cannot be together, but we have these awesome technology that we can use, and hopefully everyone is safe. So a little bit about myself. I work at Red Hat, working in a project called Quarkus. Maybe you heard it, maybe you're not, but it's not what we're going to talk about here today. So making a little bit of context, I used to work as a freelancer for some time and used to work as a consultant to a few companies. And one of my tasks about that was actually helping teams and trying to bootstrap projects and try to come up with architecture for people to use. And it ended up coming into this session, which basically is something new. So I haven't presented this session before. So hopefully, let's see how that goes. And the idea with this session was, so I came up with when I was doing my freelance work and working with these companies, I came to realize that people and some of developers were not really aware of one of the biggest strengths about Java, which I believe is the ecosystem, right? So when you think about it, and if you're not aware, I mean, especially, probably have a lot of people here, a lot of developers that are more experienced, maybe some are more juniors. But one of the interesting about our Java ecosystem is if you require something, there is a very high chance that you can find it somewhere already done for you in a library, right? So one of the things I like about Java is not only the language and JVM itself, but the ecosystem around it, right? There is so many good libraries, so many good technologies around it that you can use, which is really, really awesome. So this session, it came about with some of the libraries that I usually put on every project that I work on. Um, One of the reasons why I chose these libraries, I mean, most of you can discuss it, you can debate it because most of you are probably going to have your own personal preferences, and that's completely fine. I chose these libraries because those are the ones that I feel more comfortable with, and those ones of the things that I believe that brings value and makes easier to develop whatever application you're trying to write. So without any further delay, I'm going to start talking about some of them, um, doing a couple of a little bit of introduction, showing a couple of code samples, and then going from library to library. So another interesting thing about this session is there are no slides. Everything is going to be on the IDE. Everything is going to be live coding. So I'm not really sure how that's going to go. So hopefully that also is going to go okay. So let me go and share my screen and see how we go. Okay, so let me move here to my IDE. So one of the first libraries I want to talk to you about is Lombok. So maybe some of you already heard about Lombok before. Maybe some don't. Even if you have, maybe I can show you a couple of other tricks with Lombok. But the idea with Lombok is it uses an annotation processor at the compiler at the compiler to generate bytecode and classes for you. Not only allows you to generate additional methods to your classes, but it allows you to do a lot of black magic around your code. So you might be wondering that maybe that's a dangerous thing, and probably it is. But in my opinion, the amount of code saving that you do by using Lombok does does make the effort go away. So I'm using Lombok for most of my projects for a considerable amount of time, maybe like 4, 5, 6 years. Can't tell for sure. And I really don't really didn't fall into any Lombok issue that I couldn't fix. Most of the times I'm able to work around them, but for the most of the simple cases, it works very, very nice. So the idea with Lombok is that you have like a bunch of annotations that you put on the class, and those annotations are going to generate stuff for you that you normally would use with your IDE. So in that sense, so if you look into this class, which is called like a book class, and it's like a regular Pojo, you have like an ID, an author, title, a year, a genre, and yes, Ben, right? Usually want to have like getters and setters and equals and an hash code and a string, right? So the idea is that, for instance, on Lombok, you have this annotation called data. And if you open this data up, then you'll see there are like some other bunch of annotations that these data relates to. The idea here is that with data, getters, setters, equals and hash code and to string, they're already generated for you. And you don't have to actually type the code or generated by the so making that this book class that I was showing you becomes very simple, and there is no boilerplate code. So you can now, if I go to one test that I have over here, now you see that I can have things like book, right, equals a new book. And so that doesn't matter. So I have getters are over here and the setters are over there. So this seems like some kind of like magic, and actually it is. You don't have to worry about how Lombok works on between, but setting up is really simple. You just have to put the dependency for Lombok, and that's it. If you're using Maven on Gradle, the build tools you're gonna pick up and the library is gonna generate things for you. The interesting thing about the dependency itself is because it's something that happens on compile time, you don't really require it on your final distribution. So you can actually set it up as a provided because you don't really require it for that. And there is one extra step that you have to do is the IDE has to know about Lombok. So usually each IDE has its own Lombok plugin just for knowing that Lombok exists and Lombok's gonna generate stuff for you. So the IDE can pick up all the stuff that Lombok generated, and you can add the auto completion for getters and setters. So getters and setters are like and constructors are very simple things to do, right? But Lombok allows you to do other stuff. So for instance, if you look into this Pojo class, I have other things like, okay, I have a no args constructor. I can also say an all args constructor or a required args constructor, and these basically are going to be set with the final fields that I have, which I don't have none. So the accessor chains is, I mean, if you look into the accessor chains, is something that can allow you to chain methods. So it's quite useful if you want to like do a bunch of sets and gets, or like set author, set gen, and you don't have to call it on each method or on the original instance itself. But then you have this builder. So on this constructor, I write manually. So in this particular case, I didn't generate it because I wanted to exclude the ID from the book. That's fine. I just created the constructor myself, but I annotated with the builder, meaning that now I'm able to, and you probably see it that over here, I can just call a builder and just have like the builder pattern direct over here, and then I can construct a new book. So if I run this code, of course, this hopefully this will run and will work. So the test was passed, was super fast. So I created a book with a builder. I just asserted that the book is myself. I can just call a setter here on the book and change the value, and then I can assert it with another book. And as you can see, here is the string. This is not the reference to string of the object. It's just an actual, it's a proper to string that was generated by Lombok. So just with a couple of annotations, I was able to generate all this code. Now, if you're wondering what's actually happening under the covers, so the IntelliJ plugin actually have a very interesting thing which is called dlombok. So you can come over here and just do dlombok data, and you can see exactly what what were the methods that were generated and the code that was generated with that Lombok annotation. So in the sense, I mean, this is mostly boilerplate, right? It's just noise in my opinion. So I'm using Lombok to extract some of those. Now with things coming in JDK 15, like field classes and things like that, maybe it's going to improve these a little bit, right? But I think Lombok still has a place. So a couple of other Lombok things. So those are usually for Pojo stuff. Now let's just say that you have like a service. So let's go over here, and you want to have a login, right? So usually it requires you to come over here and say public static logger blah blah blah. So you can just annotate with the log, and this gives you already a log instance for the JDK logger. If you want something else, you can do log for J, and this will generate a logger for log4j, right? And so let's usually you want only to have one of these, but you can see now that I have a log instance over here that I can just call, and of course I can do any login that I want. So it does save at least a line over there. Well, I mean, you still trace one with another, but it is way smaller, right? And a couple of interesting things. So for instance, I'm here, I have a service, it's going to create a book, and I'm trying to validate the author. So I can validate with a non-null, which also comes with Lombok. So I'm saying that my author cannot be null, and as you can see, I'm also throwing an exception. And if I remove, there is this Nixie throws over here. So if I remove that, usually we don't really like to catch exceptions. So this throwing exception that I have to catch. So usually I have to come over here and say like try catch, right? Well, if I use like that sneaky throws, I don't have to do it because Lombok's gonna generate that for me. So it kind of makes the code a little bit nicer. So if I come here to my API, I can just say like go and create a book. So this is gonna be exactly the same thing. So that works. And if I go and try to create a book where the author is null, so it's gonna send me a null pointer exception, even though I haven't really throw any. Sorry, that was not. Where is the service over here? Even though I haven't done anything over here, it's just being thrown by this non-null that I was putting here on this annotation. So there are a couple other interesting annotations, so you can go and explore them. So one the last that I usually like a lot is the delegate annotation. So basically this allows you to delegate stuff to other objects. So meaning now that on this book API that I have, so you can see when I was calling this book API and get instance, now I have like this create book method, which is actually not here, right? But this is actually being delegated and is being generated over here by Lombok. So let me actually remove that. Okay, and well, that's Lombok. So I hope that if you haven't learned about Lombok, now you learned, and if you have heard about Lombok before, I hope that you learn a couple of extra things about Lombok. So let's move for something else. So let me see which one that I like to use next. So the one that I'm going to talk about next is Mapstract. So Mapstract actually combines very well with Lombok. So one of the things that usually when we're building applications, so now here I have my book Pojo again, and now I'm not using Lombok. One of the things that I wanted to do with this sample is for them to just be completely separate, but all of them can be combined. I probably have to write one that combines all of them. But the idea over here now is now you have this Pojo with all the stuff, right? So now you can see some of the Lombok advantages, remove all that boilerplate. But usually when we're building applications, one of the things that we usually do a lot is we copy objects from one to another, and it is a pain, right? So in this particular case, I have a book POJO and I have a book read POJO. Maybe because one is the persistence model, another one is the one that I want to return as a DTO for my REST endpoint. Doesn't really matter. Actually, they are actually the same, or actually they are using the exact same fields, but they might be different. So we usually know that when we start to do the application, we might even use the same object, and then at some time we discover that we have to change a little bit of the fields, and then becomes a pain. So most of the times it's a good practice if we split the models up. But I'll leave that. That's not a discussion for today. Anyway, with Mapstract, it works very similar like Lombok. So in this particular case, I do have to do a couple of extra setups over here, which is set up the annotation processor path for Mapstract. And then Mapstract also works at the compile level. So it means that the dependence can be provided. And what does Mapstract does is, if you look over here, I just have like a simple interface called book mapper, annotated with the mapper annotation. And now I can just say book read to book read book. And the only thing that I'm doing over here is defining my API, which I'm saying, so I want to have a source which is a book, and the output should be a book read. And what Mapstract is going to do is it's going to look into both objects. It's going to generate code to copy one to another based on the field names, right? So actually, if I go over here, you'll see that this was the class that Mapstract generated. And if you look into the two book reads, you'll see, oh, book equals null, return null, but then you'll see all the setters from one to another converting the actual book to a book read, right? And of course, this is like a very simple mapping, but you can do other things like you can ignore the fields that you want to map. You can actually say, I want to return a book based on another target and another source. So there are like multiple combinations that you can use, but I found these really useful to copy objects from one to another. So in this particular case, let me show you an example. So I'm creating a book over here. I'm setting a bunch of different values. And then I'm just going and say book mapper to book. And I'm copying my book copy to the book. So if I run that one, hopefully should work. Then the one that I get is, so if you can see over here, I have one book which is on ID 1, and then I just create a new book with an ID 2, and then I copy all the data from the book 1 to book 2, which only had the ID, but now all the fields are over there, so everything looks fine. This one over here is calling the other API. So in this particular case, it's just asserting, but the idea is here I have a book, and then I'm just copying it to a book read. And the book read, of course, has all the data over there. So if I actually come over here and I can do like an output for the book read, I'm not sure to have the string over there, but if not, I'll add them. Yeah, I don't. And of course, I don't have Lombok over here. That's going to make it a little bit easier, but I'm just going to generate one here directly. And there you go. But yeah, so now my book read is all the data that was on the book. So Mapstract allows you to copy objects from one to another. It has a lot of, you can set up your own conversions if you want to convert objects that are a little bit different, types. You can go and explore it. I think it's a very interesting library. And one of the advantages that I see in Mapstract is there are other libraries that do these kinds of copy. But the idea with Mapstract is because everything is generated and there is no reflection taking place, it's like super fast when converting objects to another at runtime, because there is no introspection happening on, there's no setting up objects, there's no creating objects by reflection. Basically, as I see on that implementation over here of that interface, everything is just simple Java code, plain code, which is super fast to run, right? Okay, so that was Mapstract. So let's see which one will go next. So let's go to config. So config, so we actually, before going into config, I'm just gonna do like a quick, let's just say how to say this. Well, maybe I'm a little bit biased to talk about config because this is one project that I've been working a lot. But I also find it super useful because every time we're building applications, we ended up requiring to perform some kind of configuration, right? We want to change the port of the application. We want to change the currency value of whatever thing we want to implement, right? So most applications have some kind of configuration that you want to change at runtime. So config allows you to do that in a very easy way, and you can use it as a standalone library. So in this particular case, I'm using a library called small-config, and setting it up is just like a couple of dependencies. It's called a small-config, and also requires this Jakarta annotation, so nothing out of the ordinary. And what I'm going to do over here is I can set up again another interface called server, and then I annotate with a bunch of other annotations called like config mapping, and I set it like a prefix, a host, a port, a timeout, a threads. And the idea over here is I'm going to generate an object and populate it with some configuration values. Now, where does these configuration values come from? So in this particular case, I can use these microprofile config properties, right? And now you can probably see the pattern that's being established from mapping this property configuration to that server class. So you can see like server.host, which means that the prefix is going to be server, and then it's going to be mapped to the host method name. If you have a different name, of course, you can just set up these annotations called with names. So we try to map using the method name, but if you want to have a different name, you can just set that up in a different way. Because of course, this microprofile config.property is just like a string value basis with key and value. Sometimes you want to require some conversions. So most of the conversion already happens under the covers if you're using the basic types like integers, longs, and things like that. But in other situations like this timeout over here, where I want to set up a particular duration, then I can just come and create my own conversion. I say implement converter. I get the string that's coming from my configuration properties. Do whatever conversion I want, and I return the object, and then I can just come over here and say, hey, the timeout property name is going to be converted to a duration, and this is going to be the converter to use, and that's it. So it also supports maps under the covers. So in that particular case, you can see like server.form, meaning that it's gonna map to a form method over here, and then after that's gonna be the key name and then the value on the map. And then also optionals and subgroup. So as you can see over here, so host, port, timeout, they're all like in the main group, and then there is this optional SSL group, which means that I may not have an SSL configuration, which adds some other properties, right? And if you now look into here again, I can have like server.ssl.port, meaning that this is going to be the main group, this is going to be the subgroup, and this is going to be the leaf property name to map. So let me run this really quick. So if I run this, this should work. So let me run that one first. So the way that you retrieve a configuration, you can just go and say config provider get config. This will give you like a config object. And from the config object, you can retrieve simple configurations, right? So I can say config get value and passing the property name that I want. In this case, for instance, I have like that server host, but it can be like server port. And I can say whatever type I want to convert it with. So in this particular case, integer is already over there, so you can map it directly. But in the case of the mapping, well, I have to go and use this vendor API from small config, which is the library that we're using, and can say config, say get config mapping. You pass in the class that interface, right? And then it's gonna give you an object populated with all those variables that I was seeing, so you can just do it and grab all the things that you want over here. Another interesting thing about this mapping thing is, again, even though this is not being generated at compile time, it's just being generated with bytecode directly. So meaning there is no reflection taking place. So again, this is super fast to work. So have a look and see if that works for you. Oh, the final thing I want to show over here is that config is not only about setting up these configurations on these properties files, right? Because that won't be very useful. So on config, you're able to actually override values setting system properties. So in this particular case, and as you can see, even though on my micro profile config, I have the server port 8080, I can just say, no, my port is 1990, and now, as you can see, I exerted for 1990, and that's the value that I get. So you can use like environment variables as well, system properties, and you can even implement your own config sources to grab configurations for data for databases, REST endpoints, whatever you want, and then it uses like a priority queue to figure out which value is going to use based on the config source and the priority that config source has to set up the value on the config or the config mapping. Okay, so that's smallware config. So let's see where we're going to go next. So I have like around 50 minutes, I believe. So commons. So commons, it's probably heard about a lot of these projects. I usually use them a lot again. So these are like the Apache Commons objects and usually dependencies, I mean, or libraries. So the three that I want to talk about is probably the ones that I use the most. It's Commons Lang, Commons IO, and Commons Collections. So all of these have some interesting features that that you probably want to use in whatever code you're writing. So let me show you a couple of them. So let's start with Commons Lang. So Commons Lang has its own string utils, right? So the string object, there's a bunch of other methods directly on the JVM version of string. So most of us already probably write like a string utils class, but usually what I found is that string utils from Commons Lang has everything that I need that extends things from string. Well, not extends, but in the sense that gives more methods that string doesn't have that allow you to do other stuff. So, for instance, if you're picking up here and you have a blank, which is a very common case, right? And if you go and type name.isBlank, which is basically coming from Java Lang string. So isBlank doesn't really check if that is null. So it's actually plain, because sometimes, or most of the times, I want to actually check if is null or is blank, right? So I have to come over here and say if name different from null, and now I can do my name is blank check. Of course, now ID is complaining because it's actually smart enough to see that that's over there, but if it's coming from another source, it's not going to be able to see it. But actually, string utils is blank already does that check for me, so it's actually a little bit easier to see. So in this particular case, if I do it like that, one of them will throw the null pointer exception I want to avoid, and the other one I'll just call directly without any real issue. So there are plenty of other methods here on string utils that you want to check. So coming from rotate, abbreviate, right? So append is missing. There's something that I use a lot as well. Joins, there are a lot of them over here. Which ones? No, not trim. There was one that I wanted to, well, I can't remember. Never mind. But you get the idea. So if you don't not to worry about this, usually that's the one that I recommend to use. So Commons Lang has a couple of other extra things. One of them is Tuple. So as you know, there are no tuples in Java. So probably there's one on JavaFX that people used to use, but now JavaFX is not part of the JDK distribution anymore, or the most recent version. So you cannot use that. Some people use point from AWT, but I mean, those are like just workarounds to real tuples, right? So Java command line gives you a pair, which is a tuple, so you can just do like pair it off, and here you have a tuple. If you want to have a triple, you can use triple as well. So another thing that usually people use to do tuples is the map entry, which it works fine, but it's not something that I recommend. So if you have the pair, now of course you have pair dot get left, and you can grab the left object, or if you want pair, you can say get right and you get the right object, or you can do pair get key or pair get value. So now you have the tuples and you can use it in your code without having to worry too much about it. The last thing from commons lang is the reflection utils. So if you want to use reflection, most of the times, let's just say you have like a user object, and this user object, you want to set up whatever field it is. So if I show you this user object, you see these fields are private. So if I create a new object, I have to go and pick the declared field. I have to set accessible equals true, and I have to say, okay, first name set whatever, and I have to catch some exceptions on that. And after that, I'm able to set the first name to my own name. Now, if you're using commons lang reflection utils, this becomes a little bit easier. So you still have an exception to catch, but again, if you're using Lombok, you can just do the sneaky throws. But the IP is more concise, so you can just do field utils dot write field, passing the object you want to change, the field name, the value, and these last two is to make the field accessible if it's private. So it becomes a little bit better. I think the API it's a more expressive in a sense that you understand exactly what you're doing instead of having to call a bunch of methods to set the field accessible and set up the value and so on and so forth. So there are other reflection utilities over there. So that's this is one of them. So you can pick that up and check. So for instance, there is this there is things for class. So it allows you to, like, for instance, retrieve the hierarchy for all interfaces. So usually it's something that you might want to do as well. So there's a bunch of things that you want to pick that up. Now moving to another one from Commons. So another one that I used to use a lot was Commons Collection. It's not so interesting anymore since streams came out on Java 8, but still a couple of interesting classes over there that I usually recommend. So one of them is a bag. The collections bag allows you to have well, as the name says, it's a bag, so you can put like multiple objects inside which have the exact same name, exact same type. So meaning that in this particular case, I can say, hey, I want to have 2 strings which are named Naruto and 3 other strings called Uzumaki. So meaning that my bag actually has 5 elements, but 2 of them are of the exact same thing, and 3 of them are the exact same thing. Now this is interesting because now I can say my bag size is 5, and I can count the exact numbers of a particular object that I have. So I can say bag.getCount Naruto, and get 2 elements. Of course, for those who might get 3. But if I don't want the duplicate element, I can just say like back unique set, and of course I have a set without the duplicates. And of course, now I only have both Naruto and Uzumaki. So this is interesting because it allows you to add and remove duplicate elements. So that's the remove, of course, will remove as many copies. So if you want to, you can actually remove all the copies except one. So it allows you to do like interesting operations with this collection bag. The other one that's also quite interesting is the bidirectional map. So I think many of us already come into a situation when sometimes we want to look a key from a map using the value. And usually that involves iterating all the values or iterating all the keys and trying to find out which key belongs to which value, which is a pain. So with the bidirectional map, you actually can set up as a regular map a key and a value. So in this particular case, I'm just using an integer and a string as kind of like an ID. And of course, I can do like map.get, and I get the value that I get associated to the one. But if I want to actually get the bidirectional map, I can just do over here and say map dot inverse bidirectional map. And now what I have is a map which has a string and an integer. So now my map is a little bit inverted, and I can do lookups on that map using the value instead of the key. So now in that particular case, and this I say map inverse by map dot get directly. So if I do it over here, right? So if I do get key, my get key is not the ID anymore, but it's just the string which was the value on the original map, and of course I get the ID associated to this value. No, not that, not get key. Var. Actually, let me see. Sorry, not get. It's just not get key. Sorry, get. It was finding strange that it was giving a string. Yeah, there you go. So now if I run that one, of course I get the ID one from my ID from that particular value. Oops. Okay. I went over there. So from commons language again, this is coming from, this is a lazy object. So I forgot about talking about that from commons lang. So sometimes you might have objects that are like that are like expensive to initialize. So the idea with the lazy initializer, you can just have a method called initialize, and you can do like return this new expensive object. As you can see, I'm just doing like a sleep over here. Now, the interesting thing about the lazy initializer is it's already written in a way that allows concurrency access, so you don't have to worry about that in any way. So, I mean, this is thread safe. So in this particular case, I can just say lazy expensive object. Now, instead of having my expensive object, I extend it, and now I can initialize it directly in any place, and defer that really expensive operation to another time, because I may not even need it, and just do it when I actually need it, without doing it, for instance, in an initialization block, or when I'm creating the actual object. So Commons IO, this gives you utilities to work with files. So as you probably know, working with files is sometimes a pain in Java. So this allows you to do really interesting things. So for instance, you have these IO utils, which allow you to, in this particular case, I'm just calling to input stream. You can say, you can pass whatever sequence you want over here. So like my own name. And this is going to generate directly an input stream from that particular string. And then I can just say copy to file that input stream, and then I generate a text file with my own name just by creating these two input stream and these file utils get file and set up over there. So you may notice I'm not using these a tribe with resources because I'm opening IO classes, so I probably need to close them. The proper way is, of course, using the tribe with resources, but I also like to sometimes also use these close quietly in the case that you want to pass the streams from method to method. Then in the particular case, you can just say these close quietly plus input stream, and then you get here a lambda expression where you get the closable, and then you can do additional cleanup. Actually, not closable, sorry. The exception that you get, and then you can handle it in whatever way you want. So it is convenient for that. Now, as you can see now, I'm actually, so I write this file to my temp folder. I have this file utils list file. So one thing that file is also bad is handling extensions. So for instance, this list file allows me to pass in a string of extensions I want to filter. So in a very easy way. Of course, if I run this one, everything will pass. So yes, I wrote a file with that name, then I tried to find it just with that extension. So the assert is one. And now I'm going to open that up again. So very easy, like file utils get file, open the input stream. And then I can actually read it with this line iterator. So I don't have to like do a bunch of code to read that file using like buffer readers or buffer streams. So everything is already handled by this line iterator, passing the file input stream. And then it's just a simple iterator that I can just iterate and read the file. And again, I just do the close here. Ideally, you should use the tribe resources, but I wanted to also show you that you have these close quietly. Okay, so this is commons, the commons Apache objects that are libraries. There are a bunch of others that you might want to look, but now you get the idea on what you can get with them. So a couple of other things now. Let's move to Faker. So I'm going to focus a little bit on some testing code. So as you can see, I'm using JUnit for writing my tests. I'm not explicitly talking about JUnit. I think that if you look into Maven Central, it's probably one of the most downloaded libraries. So I'm not going to go into detail on that. But Faker, I like Faker in the sense that Faker is actually a very simple API that has test data that you can use. So you can just say like Faker instance. So if you look into libraries, just like a simple library coming from GitHub. And Faker, if you open up Faker, you'll see there is a bunch of other objects like saying ancient, aviation, alarm, addresses, books, superheroes. So there's a bunch of other things like League of Legends, Overwatch, and these actually have fake data related with that, with those particular themes. So if picking up the books theme, remember that I have a lot of books, right? So I can just say Faker, right? Oops. And not that one. And I can say book, and this will give me a book, right? So in this particular case, I have like stream generate a book. I want to generate 10 books, and I just want to print them out. So if I run that one, I'll have 10 books. So unfortunately, they don't implement the proper toString. So I might have to just replace this with a lambda on this class. So instead of just printing it that way, well, let's just print X title and see how many titles that we got. Yeah, so we got all of these titles, see? And if you want a hero, you can generate heroes as well, right? And there you go. You have like, actually, I don't know any. Does any of you know any of these superheroes? Well, let me try to generate a few more. Oh, you have Super Saiyan Vegeta. I like, oh, that was a Dragon Ball, yeah. So those are, you can generate like Dragon Ball characters as well. So I'm pretty much almost out of time now. So let me show you one of the lasts. So test containers. So I really love test containers to do testing. So test containers allow you to actually run a Docker container when you're running the test. So in this particular case, I'm running a Postgres database with my test, meaning that I don't have to set up any. I think I lost my sound, so I have to change the microphone. Hope that you're hearing me now. So anyway, what I was saying is that with these test containers, I was able to run a Postgres database, and then I just create the table. I do a couple of insert statements, and when the test finish, the test will just remove the Docker container, and that's it. So I think that I'm out of time. So this project is available on my own GitHub account. So if you go to GitHub/Roberto Cortez, I'm just going to paste that on the chat. And of course, this is completely open. So it has everything that I show you over here. So where is the chat? So I'm actually going to stop sharing for now. So that's the link from Java. Yeah, sorry about the sound. Apparently I charged my headphone, but apparently they didn't charge properly and I lost the sound. And yes, that's pretty much it. So let me see if there have any QA over here. Okay, so set up Lombok with Eclipse IntelliJ. Yeah, that's correct. So both of them work. Yes, the config library is called Smileware config. Provide a list with config. Yes, that's possible. So you can also map collections. Yes, how lazy initialize the first from getter lazy is true. As far as I remember, I think that lazy from Lombok is not thread safe, but I might be wrong. And I think that's it. So thank you so much and see you next time.